Good morning, everybody. Last day of our awesome conference. We are really happy for everything that we have been watching and all the conversations we are having, everything we learned. And it's my pleasure to start this last day. And today we will have a very important symposium. And I will call here Tania, who is the chair of the symposium, who will introduce the symposium and the speakers. Okay? Let's have a very nice final day of our conference. Thank you.
Hello, good morning. My name is Tania Lucci. And first of all, I would like to thank, in my behalf and in behalf of my colleagues that are part of this symposium, the great opportunity that we had to take part of this wonderful event that took so long. It was conceived for so long, and only now it's happening. So thank you, Professor Yarka, for your great effort and dedication in making this happen. It's very incredible, your energy. And also thank you, the organizing team, for the wonderful job they are doing, and I'm very happy to take part of it. Thank you. So today, now, I will present the symposium. We will have this contextual variability and human parental investment. The first presentation will be by Suemi Tokumaru. She is professor at the Universidade Federal do Espírito Santo, and she has great experiences in parental investment and non-verbal behavior. Unfortunately, she could not be here presentially, but she's here with us virtually. That's something that we learned with the pandemic, so it's a good thing that we learned from that. And next, I will present part of my PhD, and it's on mother, father, infant, newborn interaction at birth. Then I will present that. And after that, we will have Julia Scarano de Mendonça. She's a professor at Ibirapuera University, and she did her PhD on postpartum depression and paternal depression. So she will talk about this on this third presentation. And by the end, we reserved a little bit of time so we can discuss with you this topic. So now I will invite Suemi Tokumaru. She will be here with us at the end also for the doubts, okay?
Good morning. I'm Suemi Tokumaru. I'm a professor at the Universidade Federal do Espírito Santo, and I'd like to thank the organizing committee for this wonderful event and for hosting our symposium. And today I'm going to talk about parental investment and childhood unpredictability. There is growing evidence in the literature that living in an unpredictable and harsh environment during childhood can promote the development of a fast life history, which is characterized by an earlier sexual maturation, shorter interbirth intervals, lower parental investment, the occurrence of insecure attachment styles, behavioral problems, increased risk-taking, and less future orientation. From an evolutionary perspective, the development of a fast life history in the face of childhood unpredictability and harshness can be an adaptive strategy because it can lead to earlier reproduction, avoiding losing future reproduction chances due to environmental uncertainty. There is no consensus in the literature about how to measure childhood unpredictability or childhood harshness. We can find the use of a number of proxies, and sometimes the use of the same proxies for both constructs. And it has been a lot of discussion about what is really childhood unpredictability or childhood harshness, if they are different constructs or if they are the same constructs. So in our work, we focused in investigating how the perception of family unpredictability during childhood modulates adolescents' sexual life onset and adult parental investment. To do that, we developed the scale of family unpredictability during childhood. It is a scale with 3 factors: family unpredictability of nurturance, money unpredictability, and meals unpredictability. In the nurturance unpredictability, we have items as I felt loved by my family, I was sure that my family would support me if I needed, and I knew my family would be there to take care of me. As you can see, this is a factor that tries to evaluate the relationship between the person that's answering the scale and her family during childhood. Her family or her parents or her caretakers. In this dimension, money unpredictability during childhood, we have items as there were times when you didn't have money to pay for basic needs. When I was a child, my family was never sure how we would pay our bills from month to month, and my family was never sure whether there would be food for daily meals. So here we try to evaluate the unpredictability about financial conditions during the childhood of the participant. And in the last dimension, we had items like usually dinner was served at the same time every day. During my childhood, the same people sat down and ate dinner Monday to Friday, and usually lunch was served at the same time every day. As you can see here, this factor, unpredictability of meals during childhood, refers more to the people who were present during meals than to the presence of food itself. People answered in a 5-point scale from totally disagree to totally agree. We also developed the parental investment scale with 3 factors: investment in basic care, in social life, and in values and discipline. We asked this question: how much do you perform or did you perform the following activities? Then we had a list of activities. And people could answer from 1 to 5, never, to always perform the activity, or 0, that it was for those activities that didn't apply to the age of the child. In parental investment in basic care, we had items as take care of the child when she or he gets hurt, reassure the child when she or he is afraid, give love to the child. In parental investment in social life, we had there take a walk with the family, take the child to children's parties, visit relatives with the child, stimulate the child to play with friends. And in parental investment in values or discipline, we had items as show examples of good behavior, scold the child when she or he disrespects someone, teach moral values to the child, and teach the child about rights and duties. Our first investigation, we investigated if there was a relationship between family unpredictability during childhood and parental investment. And our participants were 355 fathers and mothers of children of 0 to 12 years old. Most of them were female, about 41 years old. They were mainly married. They belonged to social classes C1 to B1. They had 1 to 2 children. The age at their first child was around 27 years old, and the age of the younger child, the one that they were responding about, was 11 years old by the time of their participation. Here you can see the correlations between family unpredictability during childhood and the parental investment of these parents. And what can we see here? That nurturance unpredictability correlated significantly and negatively with all dimensions of parental investment, which means that the more family unpredictability of nurturance during childhood, the less parental investment we had for these parents. Unpredictability of meals also correlated negatively with parental investment, but just for parental investment in social life and in values, the correlations were significant. Now, with unpredictability of money during childhood, we had an unexpected correlation. Significant, unexpected correlation. It was positive. So the more money unpredictability during childhood, the more parental investment in values and discipline. We also looked for correlations between some social demographic variables and the parental investment. And what we saw was that family income and purchasing power had significant correlations with parental investment in social life and values and discipline. Both family income and purchasing power had positive correlations with investment in social life. So the more the family income, the more investment in social life, and the more purchasing power, the more parental investment in social life. And they were both negative correlations with parental investment in values and discipline. So the more purchasing power and family income, the less investment in values and discipline. Okay, so some discussion. We saw that in general, family unpredictability during childhood was correlated to adult parental investment in the expected direction. So we think we provided some support for the idea that childhood unpredictability can promote a fast life history strategy. If we consider that the decreasing in adult parental investment is a proxy for is a trait of the life history, the fast life history strategy. We saw that unpredictability of nurturance was the factor that most affected parental investment, and we think that this can indicate that unpredictability of nurturance is one of the most important cues to the child's future unpredictability, and this can be important for the discussion about how to measure unpredictability during childhood. We think that our operationalization of nurturance unpredictability agrees with Bell's, Kiehl, and others' propositions about the role of the parent's responsiveness to the child's needs in shaping children's unpredictability models, and that's why we had this success in measuring family unpredictability. We saw that basic care was the parental investment least affected by childhood unpredictability and by the present socioeconomic conditions. We interpret this result as related to the importance of the basic care to the child's survival, and we suppose that the invariance of parental investment in relation to unpredictability during childhood and the present socioeconomic conditions may be the result of an adaptive selection. But we also suggest that this sample was not in extreme harshness or unpredictability. So we should further investigate if these extremes conditions would still maintain basic care. We saw that parental investment in values and discipline increased as childhood unpredictability in money decreased, and it decreased as the present socioeconomic conditions increased. And we think that this can indicate that values and discipline are most valued by parents from lower socioeconomic status. Presently, we cannot explore this question further, but a possibility is that parents of higher socioeconomic status can be less pressed by social norms and can value less this investment in values and discipline. So some conclusions, we could see that the levels of family unpredictability during childhood are negatively related to parental investment during adulthood. And although this relation was proposed by other authors, to our knowledge, this is the first demonstration that family unpredictability during childhood negatively affect parental investment during adulthood. Other authors have shown the effects of environmental unpredictability mainly over sexual behaviors. We are aware of one work, from Kiehl, 2007, that demonstrated that environmental unpredictability, present environmental unpredictability, had a negative effect over parental investment. So we think that this result, together with other results, can have a very important implication for public policies, considering that families in social and financial risks are more prone to adopt a fast life history strategy. We think that policies can direct effort in the promotion of more predictable environments. We also investigated how family unpredictability during childhood would affect adolescent sexual life onset. And we studied 203 students that were enrolled in the 60th and 70th grades of 2 public schools at Vitória, Espírito Santo. Most of them were female. They were about 12 years old. They self-declared as pardo, mainly. And in purchasing power that could vary from 0 to 100, they had an average of 28 points. So low purchasing power. About parental separation, 39% answered yes to this question, 33% no, but we had a number that did not answer or had other answers. For example, they didn't know if their parents were separated or not because they never lived with both parents, or they never lived with one of their parents, usually the father. And the same occurred to parental death, although most of the students had both parents alive, but a high percentage of them didn't know if their one or both their parents were dead, or at least one of them, usually the father also, because they didn't live with the father, they didn't know the father. These answers. To understand the impact of family unpredictability on the adolescent sexual life onset, we asked them about the ages they expected to have their first boyfriend or girlfriend, their first sexual intercourse, to marry, to have their first child. But we started asking them if they had already had their first boyfriend or girlfriend, intercourse, child. If they answered yes, we asked at what age did that happen. If they asked no, we asked if they wanted to have a boyfriend, intercourse, to marry, to have a child. And if they asked yes, then we asked when did they expected to accomplish these things. And here we see the correlations between family unpredictability during childhood and the expected ages to do that. We hypothesized that these correlations would be mainly negative because we hypothesized that as family unpredictability during childhood increased, the sexual life onset would be, this would promote an earlier sexual life onset. And we had some evidence for this. When considering the nurturance unpredictability, it really correlated negatively and significantly with the expected age for the first boyfriend and girlfriend and for the first sexual intercourse. And money unpredictability and meals unpredictability during childhood significantly correlated with the expected age to have the first child. We also looked at the social demographic variables, but only adolescents' age correlated negatively with the expected age to have the first boyfriend or girlfriend and the first sexual intercourse. The older the adolescent, the sooner he expected to have a boyfriend or girlfriend and the first sexual intercourse, which makes sense. Only the mother's age when adolescent was born had a positive correlation with the first sexual intercourse. So the younger the mother when the adolescent was born, the earlier the age, the expected age to have the first sexual intercourse. Okay, so we think we provided some evidence that family unpredictability during childhood was correlated to adolescents' sexual life onset. For example, unpredictability of nurturance was the factor that most affected adolescents' sexual life onset, and this is compatible with the results that we found for unpredictability of nurturance in relation to the parental investment in the adults. We saw that the age to have first child was affected by money and meals unpredictability, but not by nurturance unpredictability. And we, until now, do not have a good hypothesis to explain this result. We saw that the expected age to marry was not affected by any of the family unpredictability dimensions. And in this case, we think that the age to marry in this sample may be not correlated with the life history strategy. We saw high percentage of parents that were separated or that the students didn't know about the status of the couple, of their parents. So maybe marriage is not related to reproduction in this, at least in this sample. And we saw that purchasing power did not correlate with any of the traits that we used to indicate the adolescent's sexual life onset, which is also compatible with the absence of effect of purchasing power on parental investment in the adults sample. So we can indicate that purchasing power is a different measure, and it's more related to harshness than to unpredictability, at least in this sample. And that's it. I'd like to thank a lot to the organization of this meeting and to Labetch, my lab, to the people at Labetch, to FAPS, which is the financial organization, and to my university. And thank you all for listening.
So, hello again. My name is Tania Lucci. I will present part of my PhD that I did here at Universidade de São Paulo, Instituto de Psicologia, Department of Experimental Psychology, under the orientation of Professor Emma Ota. So, well, I will present mother-father-infant interaction at birth, influence of parents' social and emotional conditions, and physical characteristics of the newborn. So, we all know the importance of this mother-infant interaction for a healthy development. There are many studies for decades that we study that, no? So we know that we have impairments in mother-infant interaction can result in hormonal, behavior, and also emotional dysregulation in diverse mammals. However, few studies have been done in the mother-infant interaction at birth. We now know that from birth, infants already exhibit many behaviors and skills that allow initial communication through gaze, voice, facial expression, gestures, touch. And now, with the new techniques, we now know that when they are born, they already have an important background of experiences accumulated during the period of intrauterine development, such as tactile experiences, sounds, the rhythm of the mother's body, maternal hormones, and so on. So all these conditions, we think it influences the infant's response to the birth experience. Well, this study was made in the context of a longitudinal study made here, conducted here in Psychology, Institute of Psychology, on postpartum depression. We started our research with 400 women. They were pregnant at the beginning, in the first interview, and we collected data until their child complete 3 years old. So it was a longitudinal study, and this is only a part of it that I will show here. So postpartum depression is a disorder that is very common. 20% of women here in Brazil reports having symptoms of depression at postpartum period. So postpartum depression is the same symptoms of the normal depression, but it happens on postpartum period. So the symptoms are many of you already know: depressed mood, weight change, sleep disturbance, psychomotor problems, lower energy, guilt, low confidence, low self-esteem, and so on. What we observed in our study was that women with postpartum depression, they evaluate having more marital conflict, report being more impatient with their child in the first year of life, and report having less pleasure in the interaction with their child. So my general aim was to evaluate the first mother-infant interactions at birth as a function of emotional and social environmental variables. So to achieve my goal, one of my specific aim was to quantify the frequency of behaviors of the mother, the father, the newborn in the immediate postpartum period, and to identify associations between emotional and social characteristics in the frequency of the behaviors. So for that, we collected data in 3 point times. One of them was in the interview when they were still pregnant, and we applied the social support scale. Then the second interview was when they went to hospital to give birth, and they stayed about 2 or 3 days in the hospital, and then we went there to talk with her, and we asked how they were feeling. That was only one question, and in a 5-point scale, so how they were feeling emotionally. And we also asked how was their relationship with their husband. Then 4 to 16 weeks after delivery, we invited them to come to our lab, and we applied the Edinburgh Postnatal Depression Scale, We collect many other data, but for this study, I will just mention this one. And we also had information about delivery conditions on the hospital records. So this is a naturalistic study, and many people collaborated to this study. So many students, some of them are here, and nurses and doctors as well. So nurses, they filmed, they registered 120 videos of deliveries that was carried out at the Universidade, at the Hospital Universitário here, no? From USP. So I was responsible for analyzing this video. When I start analyzing these videos, I realized that some of these recordings were made at exactly in the first minutes of life, when the newborns were still with blood in their skin, and they were, in the first time they were put together with the mother. And some of these videos were registered, like, I think it was like 5 to 10 minutes after, and you can see here by this photograph, they were already cleaned up, and they had using a hat, so you can see they are a little bit more calm. So I had to split my sample, and I had 60 diets before, what I called before clinical assessment, and 60 pairs after clinical assessment. So I used captive software to analyze this video, and I coded the behavior every 10 seconds. And I watched this, I was coding these behaviors about on the mother, the vocalization, if they were talking to their newborn, the touch, if the mothers were caressing these newborns, the eyes, if their mothers were looking at her infant, and the facial expression, if they were smiling, a neutral expression, or pain. From the newborn, I was observing the vocalization, so if they were in silence, if they were crying, whimpering, the body movement, if they had open or closed eyes. I tried to analyze if the mutual gaze, but it was very, very few and very rare, so I couldn't analyze this, unfortunately. And I also looked at a calming down behavior that was the decreasing of crying and physical movement in relation to the previous moment. So that was something that I looked at also. And for the father, I had a small sample. I have only 35 fathers' videos. I know they participate much more in other videos, but the nurse didn't catch them in the film, so I had only 35. And I only observed the touch. So if he was touching the mother, if he was touching the newborn, or if he was touching both. This is my sample. This woman had mean age of 25 years, mean schooling age 9 years. It's important to say that all infants of this sample, they had a normal weight, so more than 2.5 kilos, and all of them had were born with normal gestational age, non-predicted, so more than 37 weeks of gestation. We had more females than males, newborns, and most of my sample, they had a normal type of delivery, and half of my sample was the first time they were giving birth, and 50% of them had a companion during delivery. Sometimes it wasn't the husband, sometimes it's the mother or a friend, but 50%, approximately 50% of my sample had someone with them. So for the frequency of behavior, here I will show you the frequency of the mother behavior, and this is a sample before clinical assessment, so the ones that were the first minutes of life. We can see that mothers, at the beginning, they are mostly in silence, looking at their infant and with a neutral expression. And when we compare to this other sample was after, there aren't many changes. So they still are in silence, looking at and with a neutral expression, and sometimes talking to the infant and caressing them. When we look to the frequency of newborn behavior, here is the sample before, so the first minutes of life. They are mostly moving their body with closed eyes, sometimes for half of the time crying and half of the time in silence. And when we look 5 to 10 minutes after, it changes a little bit these frequencies. So mostly they become in silence, they calm down, and they start opening their eyes. And they still moving their body, although a little bit less. And when we see father's behavior, we can see here that in the sample before, they were mainly touching the mother, a little bit touching both, but very few touching only the newborns. When we see 5 to 10 minutes after, these fathers, okay, it's other sample, so not this father, but this sample, they, so they enhance their behavior of touching both and declining the touching only the mother. So here we didn't see any father touching only the newborn. My second aim was to associate this frequency of behavior that I showed you before with these emotional and social conditions. So for that, I did multiple ordinal regressions, and I had 3 models. In the first model, I considered emotional conditions. So I looked at social support, postpartum depression, maternal emotional. That was the question that I did at the hospital, marital assessment, and family environment. In the second model, I looked at the social conditions, so age, parity, schooling, and partner, if the mother had a partner or not. And on the third model, I observed the sex of newborns, gestational age, and weight. So I will show you the emotional model first. Here we are looking at the mother's gaze to newborn. This is the frequency of time in percentage. So this first column indicates that it's a low percentage of this behavior. So 0 to 25% of the time, this column indicates that the mother was gazing. And the last column, the most frequent behavior, so more than 75%. Here at your right, you can see that in red are the mothers that told us that their relationships with their husband was very bad. And in green, those that said that their relationship with their husband was okay, was good. You can see here that we had more mothers that had a problem with their husband gazing to the newborn. And here at right, you can see maternal vocalization in the same direction. So mother that had a bad relationship, they used to vocalize less to their newborn. So the better the relationship with the partner, the greater the chance of looking at the newborn, and also the greater the chance of talking to the newborn. When we asked family environment, we were asking them if they had stressful situations during their childhood. And the more stressful the maternal family environment in childhood, the lower the chance of displaying a smile during delivery. When we saw postpartum depression, just to remember you that this, thank you, postpartum depression we collected 1 month after delivery, Okay, so just to remember you. We see here the mothers with that showed signs of postpartum depression, they are represented by the red color. And here is the same percentage that I showed you first. No? So we are seeing now newborn crying. So here are the most frequently those that passed more time crying. They are all, mostly from the postpartum depression mothers. So children of women with postpartum depression showed more chance of crying. When we look at emotional state, it was in the same direction as well. So here we have, sorry, it's in Portuguese here, but when we asked them their emotional state, those who said that was bad or regular are represented by the red, and in green, those who said that were great emotionally, they were fine. So here is the newborn movement. And we also saw that the better the maternal emotional conditions, the greater the chance of the infant to show motor activity for longer. Looking at the social variables, we saw that those women that was giving birth for the first time, they showed a greater chance of looking at newborn when compared to those mothers that had already 1, 2, or more childs. The higher the maternal age, the lower the chance of smiling at delivery, and also schooling. The higher the education, the lower the chance of the mother looking at the newborn. That was something surprising for us. We didn't expect. Newborns. So when we went to see the sex of the infants, here the male are represented by green and the female by red. Here is the newborn crying. And here are the frequency. This column represents more frequency of this behavior. So you can see that male newborns were more likely to cry. And here at our right, you can see the calming behavior. So it's the inverse, obviously. They are most, they are crying more, and they are having much more difficult to calm down. When we saw the weight of these newborns, just remembering that all of these newborns had normal weight, expected, not to their expected weight, but the higher the weight, the greater the chance of calming down. And the higher the weight, the lower the chance of remaining with eyes open. Here you can see the affectionate touch, so the frequency that mothers were caressing these newborns by sex. And we can see that they were caressing more male newborn. But I think we have to also look that this, observe that these male newborns were those that were crying most as well, no? So they were more likely to caress them, the male newborns, and also to talk with them. Observing the gestational age, the lower the gestational age, the lower the chance of mother vocalizing to their infant. So just to summarize my findings, my main findings, regarding emotional conditions, infants born to mothers with emotional problems are more likely to cry. The worse the marital relationship, the less likely the mother is to interact with her newborn, so looking and talking. And contrary to what we expected, despite the emotional problems that they might develop after, the mothers didn't exhibit differences in the interaction with their newborn. Social support did not influence the frequency of maternal behaviors as well as we expected. Regarding social conditions, age parity and education predicted maternal behavior, but not the infant behavior. And having or not a partner was not an impacting variable, but rather the quality of this relationship. Regarding the physical characteristics of these newborns, sex, weight, and gestational age predicted the frequency of mother and newborn behaviors. So what we saw here is that, thank you, emotional conditions, emotional, social, and physical characteristics, all these variables influenced the behavior of the mother, of the newborn, or both, and thus interfered in the interaction with them already in the first minutes of life. So possibly, these variables can also influence the more or less parental investment in the long run. So the present research aimed to contribute to the reflection on the practice on psychologists and other health professionals in order to promote and guarantee the effective and healthy interaction from the beginning of the fetal development. Here is the team that worked on this research. I have many other persons to thank, but I just found these two pictures, so I want to thank you them. They were very important to my collecting my data, so I'm very, very thankful to all of them. And I also want to thank you for you to watching my presentation. So that's it. I have to say that we have funding from FAPESP. That's it. So now I will call Julia Scarano de Mendonça, and she will present her beautiful job on depression, postpartum depression, and father depression.
Oi. Não, vamos usar qual? Isso. E a coisinha. Espera aí. É assim? Esse lado? É aqui. Ah, tá bom. Deixa eu pôr. Não sei se eu ponho no óculos ou não. Não. Bem, good morning to everybody. So I'm going to present this study, paternal investment in the context of maternal postpartum depression and paternal depression. I think I'm going to do it, if I do it here, just a minute. So this presentation is based on a reflection about the functions that maternal and paternal depression may have in the family system. It's a chapter from this book, Handbook of Fathers in Child Development, from 2020, that I co-edited. So it's our intention to provide a model of parental depression in new parents based on the interplay between mothers and fathers' depression, consistent with family system theory. So the theory proposes that the family unit is a changing system composed of various subsystems. Here you see father-child, husband-wife, mother-child, child-child, that are interrelated and influence each other. So, and we also base our work on evolutionary approach to depression, as they provide an alternative interpretation to the most current understanding of depression as a mood disturbance. So from this perspective, negative emotions like the ones present in depression can be considered defense mechanisms, such as cough or fever. Specifically, we'll use Hagen's analysis of postpartum depression. According to Hagen, postpartum depression, PPD, is a psychological functional adaptation to a situation evaluated as more costly than the mother can cope with, indicating mother's need for extra support for the care of a newborn. From this perspective, the low mood and lack of energy that characterizes depression may be seen as a call for help. So this is an illustration. Here from this perspective, you see the mother all sad and the father here all happy and very close to the child, you know, when the mother has PPD. You know. So the idea is that when the mother evaluates the costs of caring for a new infant is very high, more than she can cope with, she may unconsciously develop a depression that will impair her capacity to care for the infant, increasing her chances of obtaining support from her local environment, especially from her partner. So the proposal predicts, first, women who perceive a lack of social support are at greater risk of developing PPD. Second, mother's PPD will enhance partner support and paternal investment. So I'll be working on the second prediction. So for this reflection, I'll be using two studies I did in the context of my postdoc that I did here at the Institute of Psychology. So the first one looks at father-child interaction when mothers present postpartum depression. And in the second one, I look at father-child interaction when fathers are depressed. So this project is the same as Tania, is the same project as Tania, the one Tania presented. It's on the genesis and consequences of PPD. And as Tania said, 400 mothers were observed from delivery to the 36 months of the child. I started my postdoc at the end of this project at the child's 36 months, and they were observing then mother and child only, so I decided to invite the fathers for the laboratory sessions. So this, I only observed the fathers when the children were 36 months. So for this study, I collected 40 child dyads that were observed here, were observed in free play interaction. So I have the measures of paternal depression that I have were collected at the child's 36 months. And apart from observing, I also gave some questionnaires to the parents. To assess postpartum depression, we use the PDS, as Tania said. It's a very known scale for depression. And to code the father-child interaction, I use the taxonomy of interactional synchrony, which is an observational measure that indicates the level of behavioral engagement between the social partners. It's a taxonomy that I developed during my PhD that I did in Canada. And, just a minute, sorry. Okay. And was published here in the American Psychological Association in 2015. So this is the taxonomy here. It has 4 dimensions: dyadic interpersonal distance, dyadic visual orientation, upper body orientation, and dyadic play involvement. So these 4 dimensions, it works like a grading scale from 4 to 1. 4 representing more synchrony between the social partners. So for example, here interpersonal distance, the level 4 would be less than 10 centimeters between the social partners, and 1 more than 2 meters. Visual orientation, 4 would be the social partners look at each other, and 4 would be the social partners look in the different directions. So it's a dyadic coding scheme. So it's here just to have a better idea. So here they are very close to each other, the two partners, no? So this would be the more synchrony reflected in a closer distance between the social partners. And here the more is more distant. Visual and body orientation follow the same idea. So it's a scale that goes from less synchrony to more synchrony. So here would be the social partners are looking at each other. Here the social partners are looking at something else. Here, one look at the other while the other looks at something else, and here they are looking at different directions. And this works also for body and for dyadic play involvement. It's the same principle. The coding process, I filmed 10 minutes of social interaction, only coded 8, dismissed the first 2 minutes, used time and interval sampling depending on the dimension. Every 10 seconds, I coded from each one of the categories was noted. No? Did inter-observer reliability before coding, 20% of the dyads, only start coding after Cohen Kappa reached 0.7 for each category. We used Interact, a German software to do the coding. We assume that father-child interaction or synchrony is an indirect measure of parental investment, and that it will be reflected in the level of synchronization between the father and the child. So I presented the method before because both studies use that same method. No? So the first study, the objective was to examine the effect of mother's depression from the postpartum period up to the child's 36 months of life on father-child interaction at the child's 36 months of life. So our question was, what happens to the family when mothers are depressed? So that's Hagen's hypothesis. So here is the result. We have, sorry about that. We have here, now the interaction dimensions, and here the depression scores, mothers at 3, 8, 36, and a profile we created combining results at 3, at 8, and 36 months, also controlled for father's depression. What we see here is these positive correlations, mother's profiles and father distance and visual orientation here. I will summarize here. So these are what we see, that fathers were closer to the child and looked more at the child when the mother was depressed. Results suggest that fathers compensate for mother's impaired functioning due to depression. Okay, so this is the second study. The objective is to understand fathers' involvement with their 3-year-old children in the context of paternal depression by direct observation of father-child interaction. The question we had here, what happens to the family when fathers are depressed? To analyze these results, we used the 3 factors. We derived 3 factors from the EPDS total score that was already published in the literature. And here, the 3 factors are depressive symptoms, anhedonia, and anxietal symptoms. What we see here is the total score. We have a tendency, but it's not significant. But when we look at the factors individually, we see that the symptom, when fathers report symptoms of depression, they are also playing closer to the child. So, summarizing, the more the father reports symptoms of depression, the closer father-child physical proximity is in free play interaction. So, this is quite intriguing. If we think here, for example, that maternal PPD and paternal depression both lead to father-child greater synchrony. So here we provide evidence. This is Hagen's hypothesis, so we provide evidence for his hypothesis. But these results on this side, it's very intriguing. No, we couldn't understand, and that was the topic. That's the main topic of this talk. Now, how can we make sense of these results here? So that's puzzling, you know, thinking a lot, how is it possible? And then back to the literature, you know, reading some things to find, looking for inspiration. So I'm going to talk briefly about these topics here. So what we see in the literature is really inconsistency, a lot of inconsistency on further research literature. And all those topics inspired us for a hypothesis we are going to propose. So what we see, what the literature shows, the great variability in paternal care expression, the paradox of facultative paternal behavior, evolution of paternal care behavior, flexibility of paternal care human behavior, and parental investment theory. So they all those theories and ideas help us to make this hypothesis that we'll present. So the idea here, what we see in the literature is that mothers with symptoms of depression are less contingent, less affectionate, less visual and vocal, present less visual and vocal communication, they structure the interaction less. This is quite consistent in the literature, but it's very, the father's literature is very inconsistent. What we see here, father's depression also impairs parenting and has negative consequences for the child's development along with mothers, mother's research. But we also find in the literature that paternal depression is unrelated to the quality of father-child interactions. And we also see that depressed fathers displayed more positive behavior towards their children than depressed mothers. So that's what we could find that helped us a little bit to understand our data. In relation to the variability of paternal care expression, we all know, we all see in our everyday life that fathers can be very different from each other. They can go from very caring to very inattentive to children as well. And so what we also see in the literature is that men have the potential to nurture, but this is not always expressed. For example, as response to babies, fathers present increase in oxytocin levels comparable to mothers, increase in prolactin levels, although the increase is not as much as in mothers, yet decline in testosterone levels. A decline, lower levels of testosterone are associated with greater response of paternal behavior, less aggressive behavior, greater focus on caring, and greater attachment to babies. The literature also shows that paternal care is very rare in nature. It occurs in less than 5% of all mammal species, and we showed we have as humans a cooperative breeding pattern of parental care. An important idea in the literature is related to the flexibility of paternal behavior. Paternal care expression evolved as a system with maximum flexibility in a species where it's not mandatory for infant survival, such that males and their partners can maximize reproductive success in different ways, depending on different conditions. On the contrary, being more fixed, shaped less by social experience and ecological pressures in a species where it's mandatory for offspring survival. And the theory of parental investment also gives some insights as they say that differences in the reproductive strategies of men male mating and women male caring explain parental investment. Trivers points out that men, but not women, can substantially increase their reproductive success by mating with multiple partners. So the theory predicts an increase in paternal care investment and a loss of mating opportunities when it's necessary for offspring well-being. So back to our data, that's what we want to understand. So the questions we pose are, does the increase in fathers' investment when mothers present PPD comes from fathers' perception, highlighting here, fathers' perception of mother's depression symptoms and impaired care alone? If not, is it related to any other mechanism? If so, what other mechanisms are fathers' increased investment related to? So we argue that then that nature may have provided the organisms with a mechanism to force a change in fathers' behavior when it's necessary for promoting offspring well-being. Maternal PPD may be one of these circumstances. Opa, oh, my God. It's too close, no, one to the other. No? This mechanism could be the triggering of paternal depression. So we further argue then that it's likely that the strong biological drive to mate in men due to a reproductive strategy based on mating behavior in opposition to women's caring strategy promotes a special openness to the outside world. Given the high costs of paternal investment in the context of mother's PPD, paternal depression may function to force a change in fathers' behavior by inhibiting their openness to the outside world and thus promoting their greater involvement with the family in the context of family diversity. Then, paternal depression may be the link between maternal PPD and an increase in paternal investment. Paternal depression during the postpartum period may have evolved as an underlying mechanism triggered by maternal PPD having the function of increasing paternal investment. So just back to our dilemma here, you know? Here what we have is maternal PPD, and this would be Hagen's hypothesis. Now, maternal PPD would enhancing paternal investment, but here we didn't know how. How come? Just as the mother sees that the father sees, they perceive the mother is having a hard time, or what else? No? So we proposed that the underlying mechanism that leads to an increase in paternal investment when mothers are depressed is the triggering of paternal depression. The literature also shows some evidence of our hypothesis. For example, the literature shows high association between maternal and paternal depression during the postpartum period. Oh my God, maternal depression has been considered the main risk factor for paternal depression. The literature is full of evidence of emotional contagion. Our previous analysis using both self-report and observational measures demonstrated that paternal depression can bring fathers closer to the family. And finally, there is evidence that men with more sexual opportunities were more depressed postpartum. Nevertheless, severe paternal depression will probably have negative consequences for family interaction. So we would like to reinforce the need for further research to test this hypothesis. We set out in this presentation that the main function of paternal depression in the context of maternal PPD is to promote fathers' proximity to the family by inhibiting fathers' outside activity. Thank you.
So, we are with...
So guys, let me just explain how it will be. So I'm going to put Suemi online with us in a call here. but he's listened to us in the YouTube live. So she will listen us before we do a question to her. So will be a time shift between the question and the answer. So be comprehensible with her, because she listened before we ask a question for her. So let me put her here. Hi, Suemi. Can you hear us?
Hi, yes, I can. Thank you. Good morning.
Okay, guys, so if you have a question.
Do you have any questions for any of the people on the table? Who's going to be first? Dennis?
I talk too much, but I'll go on anyway. My first comment is with Suemi, there's your name. I was impressed with especially one thing in your findings, and that was that wealthier families inculcate less discipline and fewer values, you said. I suspect that what's going on there is something else. I suspect that the values people are thinking about when you ask them the question is mostly about obedience. I'm wondering, and I remembered a little conversation I had once about different mothering styles with some colleagues. I had just gotten back from lunch at one of my colleagues' house, and she had at the table, she was an Argentinian woman of Italian descent. And I remember being very impressed at how their meal went. She would yell at her kids and say, "Eat your broccoli or I'll kill you." And I was, at the same time, I was with another colleague. She was Jewish. And she said, "Oh, but the Jewish mother is much worse. What she says is, you won't eat your broccoli. Your poor mother will die of a heart of sadness." And I said, "Oh." Well, I was brought up a Lutheran, and Lutheran mothers follow an open morality an open form of morality. And so a Lutheran mother looks at her child and she says, "Oh, I'm not going to tell you if you should eat your broccoli or not. That's a question you have to take, you have to make. But think hard on whether that's the right or wrong thing to do." So you go out and you kill yourself. And I think those reflect three different views of how to discipline. One is very open. It doesn't require you to follow her values or anybody else's values. You have to decide. And I suspect very much that upper class parents are trying to get their children to be ambitious and find their own careers and get ahead. And they're not going to force obedience, which is lower class. I'll be talking later about one of the things that predicts what morals parents inculcate in their children in different cultures. And obedience was one of the moral values that they looked at. And in which cultures require most obedience of their children? It's the cultures that are most stratified, cultures that have slavery. It's obvious why parents are doing that. Their children have to learn how to behave. They're going to have to kowtow to, to their rulers, whatever. So I would suggest that's an alternative explanation to the one you gave. You said that maybe wealthy parents are just absent, and that's why they're not inculcating, they're abandoning the children. It's just an alternate hypothesis to examine. But that's
Thank you, Dennis. Suemi?
Thank you for your question. Okay. I think that you were right. And I didn't say that they abandon their children. What I said is that they might be less pressured by the social norms. And that's, I think, is what you just said. We didn't have any data to explore further this result, but I agree with you. And I think that parents that are more wealthy, they also may try to compensate for their they might be not present all the time, so they may compensate with less rules, less discipline, and they also may have these values that you said, more directed to the self and more directed to the self. That's it. So I agree with you. Thank you.
I'm not saying abandon the other hypothesis about absence. That's also worth looking at, whether they're just not present.
Yeah, but it's not the same, I think, to be not present and to abandon, because in other research that we did, we saw that parents that are wealthier, they substitute their presence with the presence of other caretakers, usually professional caretakers. So it's not an abandonment, but they try to compensate the lack of their presence, and when they are present, they compensate in other ways. So, these ways do not involve discipline.
Thank you. Next question, Renata.
Hello, Suemi. Thank you for your presentation. Actually, I was thinking about your question, and I was remember my PhD when I studied the model of ecological development from Kiehl. So I think it's aligned with your thoughts. But for Suemi, I'm very worried nowadays, and I'd like to know if there is there actually any study that link the growing religious fundamentalism we are seeing in our society, Brazilian society nowadays, to greater discipline and family unpredictability, if you know something about this.
Thank you, Renata. I don't have any data about it, but it's a very good thing, a very good direction to follow. Yeah. Because if more unpredictability leads to this to have more value in discipline, then it seems that it goes along with what's happening now in our society.
Yes.
It's very interesting
A great way
that you
of
think about this.
conservatism and fascism. So I don't know if there is some studies, but I will search after and we can talk. Thank you.
Thank you, Renata. More questions there?
Very good.
Yeah, I forgot your name, sorry. Julia. Thanks for presentation, first of all. I was wondering if there was some control for the presence of some history of depressive symptoms or plain diagnostics of depression in the parents, in the fathers especially, that had the depression to the point of 36 months after the delivery. Like the ones that displayed these depressive symptoms, have they had these kind of symptoms prior to having a baby or something like that? Should I speak louder? Would that help? Should I speak louder? All right. Yeah. You were displaying some results about the depressive symptoms in these fathers up to 36 months after they had children. Have these fathers been controlled for the prior? Yes, from before they had any kid at all.
No. Unfortunately, there was no control. We just met, as I said, and the project was going on only with mothers and children. No? The father I invited at the end of the project, basically. So we didn't follow these fathers before. So unfortunately, no. But it's a very good question because it's very important. What we see, for example, in the mothers' results, the mothers who had a history of depression, prior depression, they were twice as much chance to get depressed. No, and so this is, we know it, depression is a recurrent phenomenon. No? So this is very important. The next study, we will do it, definitely. Thank you.
More questions?
Sorry, I have one more. So I was reading a paper not too long ago that made the argument that the evolution of paternal care is due more to mate guarding than to investing in offspring, because as you noted, I think the investment of fathers really doesn't make as much of a difference as the investment of mothers. So I'm wondering whether in your study, when you see that as mothers are experiencing postpartum depression, your argument is that maybe fathers are stepping in to compensate with care, but I wonder if an alternative explanation is the fathers notice that the mothers are now depressed. Oh, I think I just lost. Oh, there we go. They want to they're more motivated to invest in the children because they realize that maybe the mother is going to be less likely to invest back in them. So it might be you invest in children as a way to mate guard and make sure that the mother sticks around and stays with you and continues to invest herself. I'm not sure if there's a way to evaluate that with your data, but it was a thought that I had, an alternative explanation.
Yeah, it's interesting, but the idea, if you understood well, fathers would invest in the children to make mothers there, I think it's part of the whole dynamic, no? And I think probably there is something. There's not only an investment in the child itself, but investment in the family as a whole, no? But I think we could, for example, even the first time I did this, use this coding scheme twice. And the first time I also called in Canada during my PhD, and then here during the postdoc, in a Brazilian sample, clinical, and there was normal. And when I did at first I also called it husband-wife, and I had very interesting results. The relation, so we could do that too, to understand a little bit better the dynamics. It's it was a pity we didn't do that, but it's very time demanding and this coding, that's one of the reasons. But it was very interesting, the data on husband and wife relationship. I think if I do this again, it definitely we will include husband-wife relationship. It's very interesting. Thank you for your suggestion.
Thank you.
This is the last question because coffee break is getting called. Okay, Timon?
Okay. First, thank you very much for this symposium. It was all the presentations were very interesting, and I wonder still in this question about parental father investment. I wonder if they were if the father investment was related to a subjective perception of his importance for the success of raising the child, and that maybe the depression of the mother will make him think that he is more important for the success of the child, and that maybe the father will invest more or less depending on their own importance perception. And I wondered what you would think about that, and if there were subjective assessment of their importance. And I had the second question. I am throwing all the questions at once. For the study of Tania with the fathers also, that we saw that they didn't look or didn't touch the newborn after birth, or they were only touching the newborn when they were also touching the mother. And I wondered if you had any suggestion, interpretation about this result. Thank you.
Can you hear me? Yeah. So thank you for the question. And what I was wondering, it made me reflect on the role of the father in the hospital at that condition. So I think these films were registered in 2008, so they're a long time ago. And now we see a very high movement of, calling father to go to this birth and trying to get them more, how can I say, more involved with the birth, with the delivery condition. And I think that was the first, I think if I analyze videos of today's birth, I think it would be a little bit different. And I think when I was watching the videos, it seemed like they were feeling a little bit uncomfortable in that situation. They didn't know where he could be and what he could do and what he could touch. And I felt that, but it's my vision. I didn't ask them. So it would be important to see nowadays how these fathers, they are, interacting in that moment.
For me, Tania, just continuing this, I think I love your data. I told you already. I really see in your data in the birth of the family. I think in that moment, because at first, in the before, the father only touched the mother, because the mother was gone, and I don't know how to say it. Had the birth, and it's very difficult, and all of this, very demanding. So he touched the mother first, and then after the child comes down, he touched both, like including both. I think it's beautiful. For me, it's like that's how I call this the birth of the family in that moment. Now, first he gives support to the mother, and then he includes both, like him embraces both, the mother and the child. I think it's very nice, and we are preparing an article together on that. So.
Very nice symposium. Congratulations, everyone. Now we don't have much time for questions, so we have only a 10 minutes coffee break. Then we will have our plenary, okay? So, and if you haven't taken picture with the exhibition of human evolution, do it now because they are already packing it to take it back to the museum. So congratulations, everyone.